Hello, my lovely little gemstones. It's Saphira, and today I'm going to be reading Chapter 4 of I Am Creativity, written by myself. Chapter 4. So, what now? Roman awoke slowly, the dreams of the past fading to black. His chest ached. He hadn't only experienced the memories from his own perspective, but he'd seen things through his brother's eyes. He'd thought his thoughts and felt his emotions. He'd always imagined that Remus had left in a fit of fury, cursing his brother with every step, promising to hinder him in every endeavor, remind him that he was never truly enough for Thomas. Roman never considered that he'd wanted so desperately to stay. He swallowed past the growing lump in his throat and kept his eyes screwed shut. He didn't want to open them, didn't want to face the world just yet, not when his chest hurt so badly. "Remus," he whispered, voice cracking as a tear leaked from the corner of his eye. "Yeah?" Roman's eyes shot open at the familiar voice, and he screeched as two wide eyes met his, mere inches from his face. The creative side scrambled away, legs tangling in his bedsheets, and he crashed to the floor to the sound of joyous, maniacal laughter. "Remus? Remus?" "The one and only," his brother crooned, swinging back and forth from the upper frame of the bed. He'd ripped off the sheer curtain that normally hung there and thrown it off to the side, then somehow hung himself upside down from the frame. Roman stared at him, mouth gaping. "Why are you... You were asleep for so long. I got bored. I was starting to think you were the dead one, not me. I had to make sure you kept breathing." Roman blinked. His mind had suddenly gone blank, and there was one thing that came to mind. "Aren't you too heavy for that?" As if on cue, the curtain frame creaked and bent under Remus's weight, and he crashed hard onto the bed where Roman had been laying not a minute prior. Roman held his face in his hands, trying to reconcile the storm of emotion still raging in his heart, with the fact that Remus was lying in front of him, with his neck at a very unfortunate angle. "Remus, your head..." "On it!" the other side chirped, sitting up and grabbing his head firmly between his hands, snapping his neck back to its normal position. Roman winced at the sound. "Remus, how are you here? I saw you. You died. You turned to dust." Remus swung his legs over the side of the bed, kicking them idly as he stared down at his brother. "Yeah, I did. Your point?" "What? Oh, that's it. I must be dreaming. That battle did take a lot out of me. That's bound to give me strange dreams," Roman babbled, Remus watching with an amused smirk. He slowly got to his feet, legs shaking so badly he nearly collapsed again. He laughed awkwardly, rubbing at his chest. The ache was still there, and it was starting to worry him. He tried to put it aside for the moment, looking around at his surroundings and finding it was very familiar. "Is this my room? Why am I here? I fell asleep in the imagination, didn't I? So why..." "Our room." Roman turned and stared at Remus, who was watching him with an unreadable expression. "What?" "It's our room. Just because I left it doesn't mean it's any less my corner of the mind." Roman swallowed, averting his eyes from the intense stare. "Right. Did you see what I saw? The memories from when we were younger?" "Yep. I got to relive the glory days when I could beat you in an imagination battle before you started cheating and getting help from logic." "I'm not the one who started the cheating," Roman droned, not taking the bait. After a moment of silence, the prince gingerly sat on the edge of the bed, arms tight to his body as he tried to make himself small. "So, you and Valentine..." Remus sighed at his brother. "Yeah." Roman chewed his lip, twisting his hands nervously. The memories I saw stopped after you two left. So, did you... was it okay? There? On the other side?" He stuttered. "Were you okay? Did deceit and fear accept you?" Remus laid back on the bed, hands behind his head as he kicked his legs high in the air. "Deceit did. Fear never liked us. I was too weird, and Val was too energetic. He just stayed in his room and listened to his emo music and felt sorry for himself." The words would be biting if Remus hadn't said them so nonchalantly. "But then again, I didn't know if he liked anyone back then." "And passion. Valentine, he..." Roman choked, heart aching as he connected the dots. "What happened?" Remus tensed, fist curling so tightly he might break the skin of his palms. Then he sighed. "He gave away everything he had, and it destroyed him. Maybe he could have gone back to the way he was before, at one point, but he saw you guys were happy without him. Without us. You didn't need anyone but you three. So he stayed on the dark side, and let his mind twist into what he is now. You figured that much out, right? Roman nodded, his stomach churning. He turned into obsession. He knew he should be sad. Passion had been his closest friend as a child, after Remus. They had spent every day together, laughing and playing in the imagination without a care in the world. Valentine's relentless enthusiasm had often been the only thing pushing him forward, when nothing he created satisfied him. Tears pricked at his eyes and he took a shuddering breath, tilting his head back to try and keep them from falling. He let out a breathless laugh, rubbing at his cheek. "What's so funny?" Remus sneered. Roman's breath hitched. For all this time, I thought he was just gone, that he disappeared, alone. And I thought maybe if I had just paid a little more attention, involved him just a little more, maybe I could have kept him here. Or at least I could have been there for him when He cut himself off, shaking his head as if to physically force the thought out of his head. But now I know that he wasn't alone. Not once. Even if he had disappeared that day, you were with him. Thank you, Remus, for taking care of him. Roman could feel his brother's eyes boring into the back of his head. Then Remus barked a humorless laugh and jumped to his feet. He watched as the Duke stalked back and forth in front of him, anger pouring off of him in waves. Remus, what's wrong? I get it. I thought after you saw things from my point of view, you'd finally get it. But you're just as blind as you were back then. Hey, that's not fair. I was just thanking you for taking Valentine with you when you left. I was trying to be nice. You didn't have to do that. You could have just left on your own. Oh, so you're saying I had to leave then? You said it yourself, didn't you? You never belonged on this side. You never even liked it here. So of course you left. Why are you getting mad at me? You're such a fucking idiot. He balled his fists, facing away from Roman. He sucked in a breath through his teeth and slammed his fist into the wall. He pounded away at the same spot, knuckles bloodied as he screamed, each hit punctuating his words. I just want to bash your stupid skull in, over and over and over again, until your brain is nothing but mush. Maybe then you'd actually be able to understand. Remus, please, stop, Roman cried, pushing himself to his feet and cursing how his legs were shaking. With one final guttural scream, Remus slammed his head against the wall, fists still curled as they rested there, specks of red against the perfect white paint. Just as quickly as it had manifested, his anger vanished. He crumpled against the wall, barely able to stand. His voice was deathly quiet, and he whispered something under his breath. I didn't quite catch that, Remus. Could you... I said I never wanted to leave. Roman blinked, a hand outstretched but hesitant. What? But I thought... I saw you. I know you stopped in front of the door that night, but I just thought... Remus collapsed, legs folded under him at uncomfortable angles, and his head hung low. His brother watched him as he started shaking, and when Roman heard a quiet sniff, he surged forward and tackled Remus in a tight hug from behind. Remus, I'm so sorry. All this time, I thought you left because you hated me. After we fought that night, I never got the chance to apologize to you. It doesn't matter. Of course it does. It's my fault that Thomas stopped listening to you. If I could have just stood up for you like a prince is supposed to, then maybe we could have... Remus shook his head, laughing bitterly. You know, I was always jealous of you. Oh, huh? Wait, why? He turned to the side to look at Roman over his shoulder. Because you were always loved by the others, even when you disagreed with them. It's unconditional. They love you and they love your ideas. Just the perfect side. Roman's chest felt like it was going to burst with how much pain he was in. Remus, the rest of us, the dark sides, I guess we're called now, we're not really what you'd call a family. More like a bunch of lone wolves working together because being alone is worse than trying to get along. Remus sighed, pushing Roman away as he tried to get to his feet. He avoided looking at his brother, wiping at his cheeks with his sleeve. Well, if we're being honest with each other then, I've always been pretty jealous of you too, Remus. The Duke froze, blinking in shock. What? Why? There's nothing I've got that you don't. That's not true. I've always been the part of Thomas's creativity that needs other people's approval. I can't just create something because I want to. I always have to think about whether other people will like it. But you can just create, regardless of what others think. Remus chewed his lip, letting a small smile sneak onto his face. He offered a hand to Roman, who grabbed it and pulled himself to his feet. Do you know why we're complete opposites? How we're both creativity, but we're so different? The question came out of the blue, and Roman shook his head. Remus grinned, letting the tear tracks dry on his face. It's because we were never supposed to exist, Roman. Not like this. We were never supposed to be brothers. We were supposed to be one side, one creativity. I remember we were once. Roman suddenly winced as the pain in his chest spiked, and he would have collapsed if it weren't for Remus holding him steady. What's happening? My chest, it hurts so bad. It's almost time, I think. What? When we split, you stayed in the original creativity's body, while I became a brand new side. The split just took a giant chunk from you, scooped out all the parts that were bad, and formed it into me. Since my actual physical form is gone, I guess we're going back to the way we were. Roman's head snapped up, eyes wide as he stared at Remus in disbelief. Does that mean we're going to be shoved together again? It's probably going to hurt a lot, and we might not fit anymore. It could be agonizing, Roman, and we might just end up like this again. Roman shook his head, a soft smile dancing on his lips as he forced himself to stand up straight without leaning on his brother. He met Remus's eyes evenly. No, we're going to make it work. I'm never going back to this. We can work together, right? Remus snickered, shrugging. I don't know. That depends on you recognizing my brilliant ideas, doesn't it? Roman rolled his eyes and pushed at Remus's shoulder playfully, eliciting a laugh from the other side. Then, as the pain surged and the lights in the room flickered, Roman used the last of his strength to close the distance between them, and he wrapped his arms around his brother's shoulders, squeezing as tightly as he could. Remus returned the hug after a moment, and they stood there in silence. After so many years, after countless hours of playing and fighting and creating together, after years of arguing and insults and opposing each other, they finally could be simply what they were meant to be. Hey, Remus? Let's go. We'll take care of Thomas together. Please. He will wake up, Virgil. But what if he doesn't? He got hurt fighting Remus, and then he just passed out for no reason? And now this! Or even worse, what if he wakes up and he doesn't remember anything? What if he forgets us? That's highly unlikely. Roman just needs time to recover from the shock of today's events, that's all. And even if he does awaken with some form of amnesia, he will still be Thomas's creativity. It may take longer to fall back into a routine, but he will be all right. Please, Roman, open your eyes. The side in Patton's arm shifted, eyelids twitching and dragging in a deep breath. He felt warm fingers carding through his hair, his head and shoulders resting on someone's lap. There was another set of hands holding his hand hanging off the couch, clutching onto it like a lifeline. His whole body ached, the pain concentrated mostly in his chest and a dull throbbing on the back of his head. The voices around him were garbled, like his ears were full of liquid. He winced, trying to shift his head to the side and relieve the pressure. Roman! The voice was loud in his ear. He twitched, cracking one eye open and squinting at the sudden flood of light. The side holding him leaned over, casting a shadow on his face and staring down at him with concern. Are you all right, Roman? Roman. They kept calling him that. Was that his name? Morality? Is that you? The face twisted in acute concern. There was a hand on his forehead, gentle and warm. Yes, it's me, kiddo. It's your Happy Pappy Patton. You're pretty out of it, huh? You haven't used my title since we told Thomas about our names. Oh, right. Right. Patton. Sorry, Patton. I'm just a little off. The hands holding his squeezed tightly, and the side in Patton's lap jumped as he saw who was sitting on the floor next to him. Fear? What are you doing here? The purple-clad side sucked in a breath, tears pricking in his eyes. He quickly let go of his hand, moving away and ducking his head. The offending side was slow to catch up, but he quickly shook his head and waved his hands in the air. Sorry, I meant anxiety. No, Virgil. I'm sorry. I didn't mean... It's okay, Princey. I'm just glad you're okay. Virgil mumbled, dabbing at his eyes with the edge of his hoodie. Princey. He liked that a bit better, but it still didn't feel right. Don't stress yourself out, Roman. It will be best if you don't force yourself to recall information if you're having memory issues. A third voice spoke up, and a dark shirt with an indigo tie came into view as the side knelt down where Virgil had been sitting. Logic. Logan. I'm okay. Just a little confused. He looked around at the 3 worried faces that were staring back at him, blinking to clear his vision. I'm not Roman. Morality, Patton, he corrected himself, tilted his head in confusion. What do you mean? Of course you are. You're our one and only Prince Roman. You fell unconscious after your battle with Remus was over. We were going to remain in the imagination, but it began storming soon after that. And your room was locked, so we brought you to the common room to let you sleep. Logan interrupted, hoping to gently prompt Roman's memories. I see. He groaned as a fresh wave of pain bloomed in his chest, and he tried to push himself into a sitting position against his friend's protests. There were several hands on his back and shoulders, helping him shift to lean against the back of the couch. Take it easy, Princey. Oh, kiddo, are your ribs still hurting? Don't move too fast. You could cause yourself to faint again. He shook his head, taking slow, deep breaths to try and ease the ache. He stared up at the ceiling, trying to calm the thoughts whirling around in his mind long enough to understand what he was feeling. He wasn't Roman. He knew that for certain, despite how familiar the name was. Hearing the name in reference to him felt wrong, in a way that he wasn't sure he'd be able to describe even on a good day. Being called Princey was slightly better, though it was still wrong. He'd heard the name Remus before, and that felt familiar as well. It was wrong too, but familiar, and he wasn't sure if he'd feel better if they referred to him with that name instead. He didn't think so. I'm not Roman, but I am. And I'm not Remus, but I am. I remember so much, but it's like it was a dream. A vivid dream that I was stuck in for years. I can't remember the last time I was awake. The 3 sides shared a worried look with each other. Patton leaned over and rested his hand on the other side's shoulder. Hey, kiddo, I think that battle really took it out of you. Why don't we get you to bed, and you can get some more sleep and tell us about it in the morning? Sleep was the last thing he wanted, but being alone would be helpful. He could grab a notebook and try to write down his thoughts. He nodded, opening his eyes and looking down to watch his feet and make sure he didn't trip. What he saw made him stop cold. After a tense moment, he jumped to his feet, swaying wildly. Logan and Virgil both reached out to steady him, but he pulled away, waving his hand in the air to manifest a full-length mirror in the middle of the floor. He felt like he'd been punched in the diaphragm as his breath wheezed out of him. He didn't know what he'd been expecting to see, really, but what he saw defied any and all expectations he could have held. The entirety of his outfit was a light gray, almost silver. Golden trim ran across the entire outfit, and gold epaulettes sat on his shoulders. His collar was short and buttoned to his neck, and there was a strip of silver hair running through his bangs. Gray pants with gold thread along the seams were tucked into black boots. A red sash crossed from one shoulder down to his waist, and a similar green sash was tied around his waist like a belt. But his eyes were drawn to one thing, and he ignored the others' insistence for him to sit down as he turned to the side, studying the emblem sitting proudly on his bicep. A shield, with a sun and moon in each top corner and star trails connecting them into one sky. A castle stood below, red mountains behind and black seas in front. There were 2 tentacles curling out of the water on the edge, wrapping up towards the castle. Somehow, he knew it wasn't threatening the castle, but rather it was protecting it. Behind the shield was a sword, a black handle with thorny green vines crisscrossing over it. He couldn't get enough. His hands gripped the sides of the mirror tightly, eyes darting around to absorb each and every tiny detail. Tears pricked at his eyes and he took in a shuddering breath, resting his forehead against the cool glass. The other 3 sides shared a concerned look, and Patton stepped forward, gently putting a hand on the other shoulder. Hey, it's okay, kiddo. It'll all be okay. Why don't we get you back to your room? You can change and get some rest, and everything will be better in the morning. I'm not going to play pretend with you, Patton. Patton recoiled, curling his hand against his chest. The fatherly side tried to smile. What are you talking about? I just meant... You want to pretend like all of this never happened. You want to shove away the parts of me that you don't like and act like they don't exist, so you don't have to face the ideas and thoughts that I come up with that make you uncomfortable. Or better yet, you're going to try and split me up again, so you can just toss the bad parts into the darkness and forget about him. Princey, what are you going on about? Don't call me Princey. Don't call me Roman. Don't call me Remus, because I'm not either of them anymore. I'm more than that. I'm a sum of them, more than they ever were separately. I am Thomas's creativity. It's been years since I've been myself, and all you want to do is split me apart again. The sighed, creativity, spun around, gritting his teeth and tears falling freely. Patton shook his head, taking another step back from the sheer force of his glare. No, creativity, I didn't mean... Creativity held up a hand, refusing to look at Patton. The moral side cut off, whimpering. I need some time alone. Patton's breath hitched, but after a moment he nodded and disappeared, presumably back into his room. Logan tried to reach for creativity, but Virgil grabbed his outstretched hand and shook his head. The logical side pursed his lips and glanced back up. If you change your mind, creativity, my door is open to you. Creativity nodded shakily, and in a flash they were gone as well. He tangled his hands in his hair, tugging at it and grounding himself. Then he sighed, moving to the stairs and leaning against the banister, staring up into the darkness. You two can come down now. They're not coming back for a while. At first there was silence, and Creativity wondered if his intuition had been off. Then he heard a quiet snicker and a familiar voice that made his chest ache from nostalgia. He's a lot more observant than either of the other two were. Another voice hummed in agreement, and Creativity watched two black-clad figures descend the stairs. You put on quite a show, didn't you? And I didn't detect a single lie. I suppose that means Remus really is gone, then? Deceit asked, face a mask of cool indifference. The corners of Creativity's mouth tugged upward. He's not gone. Neither is Roman. But they aren't here anymore. And they're not coming back. Not if I can help it. Creativity turned to Obsession, and he let his smile grow, though his eyes were tinged with sadness. It's been such a long time. Do you still remember me? Obsession sighed, grabbing Creativity's hand and running his thumb over his knuckles. I'm not the side I used to be. I lost that part of myself a long time ago. But, yes, I remember. More vividly than I'd like, sometimes. I understand. Everything's rushing back to me. Creativity bit his lip, trying to force down the lump in his throat. Obsession pulled him into a tight embrace, whispering comforting words and encouragement into his ear. I'm sorry, Valentine. I'm so sorry. I wasn't there for you. Hey, enough of that. Don't blame yourself. I'm responsible for my actions, not you. Got it? Obsession's voice was stern, and Creativity pulled away to look at both him and Deceit. Maybe I didn't drive you away, but Roman didn't help when he started calling you dark sides. But I can help now. I'm going to fix the mistakes they made. I'm going to make them listen to me. Make them understand how much we want to help. I'm going to try and change the way things are. Obsession chuckled low, patting his bicep. You always were one to think big, weren't you? That's a pipe dream. Things have been this way since Thomas was a kid. What makes you think things can change now? Creativity set his shoulders, giving both of them a confident smile. And until today, I was split into two pieces of myself that hated each other to death. Anything is possible. If you take the lead, maybe things finally can change, Deceit added, turning back to the stairs. Anyways, Creativity, you asked to be alone, so we should abide your wishes. One thing, before you two go. Obsession and Deceit turned to him, eyebrows raised. No matter what the others say, my room is always open to you, all right? Feel free to visit any time. We'll keep that in mind, Deceit told him, and Obsession waved gently before they both sunk out, back to their side of the mindscape. Creativity shivered, vivid memories of cold nights and huddling together under a threadbare blanket washing over him. He would change that. He didn't care how long it took, or even if the others hated him for it. He knew the unique, numb pain that came from living there, and he refused to let his friends suffer it any longer, not while he had the power to help. Creativity took the long way up to his room, both to give himself more time to clear his head, and because he wasn't sure he was up for sinking out like the others had. He passed by Logan's room, whose door was cracked open enough to see the logical side hunched over at his desk, reading a book. Creativity smiled fondly. It seemed like he'd changed the least over the years. It was comforting, in a strange way. He'd never really gotten along with logic as a child. They were complete opposites, after all. But now, the offer to talk to him and sort through his swirling emotions with his help was overwhelmingly tempting. He shook his head, moving on before he gave in. Logan was a good listener, but even with Passion's gift, he wouldn't be able to understand what he was feeling. Virgil's door was also open, though between the all-black door and the dim lighting inside, that wasn't easy to tell. Creativity regretted his words when he woke up. Virgil had looked so sad hearing his old name. He would apologize, Creativity promised himself. Tomorrow, after everyone had had a good night's sleep. The last door was closed tightly, and on a whim, Creativity silently tried to turn the handle. Locked. Somehow, he wasn't surprised. Finally, his room. The door was completely blank. No distinguishing characteristics to designate it as his. Gone were the painted designs and hung sign labeling it as Roman's. The corner of his mouth twitched upward. A blank slate. Perfect. Creativity leaned against the door as he stepped in, letting it click closed quietly. He took a deep breath, the emotions swirling wildly in his chest, threatening to burst. He started giggling at nothing, spinning around and around until his head spun. He danced to a tune no one else could hear, laughter and tears bubbling from him in equal measure. There were no words to describe the unbridled joy that coursed through his veins. Creativity grabbed a pillow as he flopped onto his bed, hugging it tightly to his chest and squealing into it. He kicked his legs in the air as his giggles died down, though the warmth in his chest didn't fade. I missed you. I missed us. I missed me. Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe so that you don't miss the last installment of this fic. That should be coming out in about a week or so, depending on when I get around to it. See you next time!